Right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please settle down. On behalf of the Vivekananda International Foundation and on my personal behalf, I have great pleasure in extending a very warm welcome to Right Honorable Michael Fallon, MP, Secretary of State for Defence, Great Britain, and other distinguished guests. We feel privileged and honored that you've taken time off your very busy schedule to be with us this afternoon. It is indeed a privilege to be listening to you subsequently. Excellency, today is a very significant day because today the world observes the centenary of the First World War. And between the UK and us and amongst the others who participate there, we will commemorate the contribution of our forces who got together to fight those forces who were wanting to change the world order and redraw the world geographical boundaries. We take great pride in the contribution made by the Indian soldiers, and it was for the first time that the Indian soldiers fought on the land, sea and air and all frontiers at that time and all theatres of war in the World War, and they won numerous gallantry awards, and also the various battlefields were littered with their war graves and also a number of memorials which were a testimony to their valor and contribution. It is also a matter of satisfaction for us to see that earlier this year a memorial was inaugurated in Great Britain near the Buckingham Palace in honor of the Commonwealth soldiers, and that included India. Excellency, it is in such a background of long-term mutual understanding and cooperation, it is of great significance that you have chosen to speak on a subject of enormous importance, and that is what is given here, the UK and India together in an uncertain world. And as we look around, frankly, the world seems to be far more unsettled than ever before. And right in our immediate neighborhood, we have the FPAC region, which does not give any feeling of joy. And as a matter of fact, after the drawdown, I do not think there could be any hope in that area unless the things settle down. And it is for this reason there is a requirement for everybody to cooperate and contribute together to make sure that there is peace in that area. And while I am talking of Afghanistan, I will also be failing in my duty if I do not mention the contribution made by the Afghan soldiers, contribution made by the British soldiers in Afghanistan as a part of the Allied forces. And we would like to pay homage to their valor and sacrifice. Now, in this unsettled world today, which you envision and you will be talking about, there are very worrisome developments which are taking place in the Middle East and the Gulf area. And along with that is the rise of another organization which is religiously absolutely fundamentalist and also somewhat on the medieval line, that is the ISIS. And I think it is a menace of this kind can be fought by the world upfront together. And otherwise, one will not be able to handle this. One can go on cataloging the list of concerns and worries which the world has today, and there are issues of concern like the economic and also the free trade and also the regional rivalries, of course, and the security of sea lanes, space, cyber, and of course, most of all, I think most of all, it is the terrorism which is of concern to the world. I do not want to take more time and stand way between you and the audience, and it will be a pleasure for us to listen to you. And on to, ladies and gentlemen, to the Secretary of State, Great Britain. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, and my thanks to the Vivekananda International Foundation and to you, General, for organising this event for me this afternoon. Arriving here again in India on the very centenary of the First World War is a poignant moment for me. It was exactly 100 years ago, in the autumn of 1914, that my own grandfather, Captain Harold Spink, sailed to Mesopotamia from Mumbai, where he was working in the Public Works Board as an engineer. And he sailed with his fellow soldiers, a nucleus of the Indian Expeditionary Force D, that were amongst the first Allied troops to land in the Middle East. Theirs is just one story of the courage that has been shared between our two nations. And whether Indian or British, those who signed up were fighting because they believed in certain essential values. So today for me is an opportunity to pay tribute not simply to my grandfather, but to all those of both nations who sacrificed their lives. This morning I had the privilege of laying a wreath at India Gate to remember all those gallant Indians who fell in World War I. And later on tonight, your Minister of Defence, Mr. Jaitley, and I will have the pleasure of attending a reception hosted by our High Commissioner to honour India's valiant contribution in support of that war effort. And I will be presenting the Indian government, armed forces and people with some commemorative tokens of our appreciation. These include digitised war diaries from the glorious India Corps that fought with such distinction in France and in Flanders, and individual memorials that recall the 6 Victoria Crosses that were awarded to Indian soldiers in that war. And behind each of these activities lies a single purpose: to show that we must not and we will not ever forget the enormous service rendered by India's heroes. More than 1 million Indians fought in every theatre of that First World War conflict, from Aden to Asia, from Palestine to Persia, from the Gulf of Oman to Gallipoli. And their courage is, I think, all the more remarkable for being entirely voluntary. Not a single Indian was conscripted, and that includes the nurses, the Labour Corps, who provided vital support behind the lines, but still in range of enemy guns. And in recalling the heroic deeds of these great individuals, we also therefore recall the shared historic tapestry of our two countries. But we don't just have a shared military past. One of the reasons I was so pleased to accept your invitation this afternoon is to remind ourselves that we have a shared military present as well. Our industries are working together on the latest high-tech equipment, such as the air-to-air ASRAAM missiles. Our scientists are making breakthroughs that may one day improve our response to chemical and biological attacks. Our troops are working together in United Nations peacekeeping operations across the globe. And our military experts are meeting on numerous occasions, from high-level visits to annual staff talks, from staff college courses to joint exercises across all 3 service domains. Even as we speak, 25 members of the Indian College of Defence Management are in the United Kingdom as part of a 5-day visit to our Ministry of Defence, to Joint Forces Command, and to our Defence Equipment and Support Organisation, to help us learn from each other. And I know from the report I received last night that they're already making a very positive impression. And the reason we work so well together in the British and Indian military is that we do share a set of common values. At the heart of those values, of course, is our shared belief in democracy. And as a British politician, proud of our democratic heritage, I can only look with pride and envy at India, the largest democracy in the world. A nation with more states and languages than the European Union. Truly one of the wonders of the modern world. And that world is very different from the one of the 20th century. Today we're seeing a rebalancing of power and resources and strength away from Europe as states like India rise and rise. We're seeing successful development on an unprecedented scale as global growth helps to lift billions of people out of poverty. We're seeing democracy and the market, the right to buy, the right to trade, the right to own, prove themselves over totalitarianism and state control as the route to prosperity and success. Yet, as you said, General, as we look to the future, we also see our world becoming more uncertain and more unpredictable. We see more states that are failing or at risk of failing, and conversely more threats that cross or ignore state borders, that are beyond previously accepted jurisdictions or sovereignties. The proliferation of nuclear, chemical and biological technologies, much of them dangerous in the wrong hands. The spread of viral pandemics like Ebola, the strain on global resources, the emergence of non-state actors who propagate global terror like ISIS. We know we can't afford to ignore such threats. Why? Because they are threats to our national security, because they create regional instability that puts all our prosperity at risk, and because they challenge very directly the resources of the international community to tackle. And both Britain and India have had painful experience of these threats on our very own streets. From the outrage of 7/7 in London in 2005 to the appalling Mumbai atrocities in 2008. The global scourge of terrorism threatens our own cities, our own peoples. And they must be faced together as they were faced together in Afghanistan. We could not have helped tackle the Taliban insurgency without the strongest of international military alliances. We couldn't have built a military partnership in Afghanistan without first having a broad diplomatic coalition. And we couldn't have made the progress that we have made in building a stronger Afghanistan without the contribution of India over the past decade, helping to rebuild the infrastructure of that country, supporting the election process which has seen the first democratic transition in the country's history, and through Indian investment, playing a major role in establishing a sustainable economy in that country. So working together isn't an option, it's a necessity. And it also presents us with a real opportunity. The new government here in India has rightly placed a high priority on partnerships. It showed its new, generous and comprehensive approach by inviting all South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation leaders to attend Prime Minister Modi's inauguration. His first bilateral visits, I noticed, outside India have been to Bhutan and Nepal, and I know that your Foreign Minister has already visited Afghanistan, Bangladesh and other near neighbours. But I know also that India is looking to pursue partnerships with wider key global players who can help it transform, as well as ourselves, China, Japan, and the United States. As you look to the future, I hope that India will continue to count the United Kingdom amongst its pivotal friendships. There are many good reasons for doing so. Let me simply lay three before you this afternoon. First, we both believe in securing stability across this region. The menace of ISIS threatens not just the people of Syria, not just Iraq and the wider region, but the citizens of all our countries, wherever they are, as we've seen from the barbaric murder of British hostages, as we've seen from the threats against all those of whatever faiths who oppose its brutal advance. And partnerships are going to be paramount in tackling this threat. We've been at the forefront of efforts with our allies and partners in the region and beyond the region, not just to target the terrorists militarily, but to prevent radicalization and to cut off the flow of foreign fighters and their supplies of finance. By way of illustration of the importance that we attach to this work, these were the themes that dominated a long discussion I held yesterday with Crown Prince Mohammed in Abu Dhabi. India too, I would suggest to you this afternoon, has a strong interest in helping to tackle ISIS and to tackle radicalization. And we are ready in the United Kingdom to work with you to that end. Turning to the situation closer to your borders, a few days ago, British troops ended combat operations in Afghanistan. But while our troops are leaving, the United Kingdom is not leaving. Our commitment to that country is an enduring one. We will continue to help build a strong Afghan national army by supporting the training of Afghan troops and through our work at the Afghan Officer National Academy. We will continue to help throughout 2015 and 2016 to build a stronger Afghan economy through substantial development assistance over the coming years. And we will go on helping to build strong Afghan institutions through political, diplomatic, and technical assistance. So that's one principle. The second principle underpinning India's and the United Kingdom's pivotal friendship is our shared commitment to promoting peace and maintaining the rules-based system of international law. In the past year, we've seen a return to what we hoped was dead and buried, war in Europe. The continent, of course, for which World War I was supposed to end all wars. Russia's action in the Ukraine threatens stability in Europe and beyond, and also threatens to create a dangerous precedent. Sovereignty, territorial integrity, respect for the rule of law, and the right of every state to determine democratically its own future. These are our principles. These are the principles to which India and the United Kingdom attach the very highest importance. So we should all support Ukraine's right to its secure borders and the right to determine its own futures. And in recent years too, we have seen the increasing dangers of international piracy on the high seas and the threats to the narrow choke points on which our trade relies. Again, we welcome India's continuing help in assuring stability and maintaining our global peace. The third reason why our friendship should continue is our shared interest in increasing prosperity. In our own countries, of course, but also in the regions that matter most to us. I recognise the emphasis which the Modi government is placing on boosting economic growth. As you'll know, our own government in the United Kingdom has dragged our country back from the depths of recession and the austerity that recession forced upon us back up to the ranks of the world's leading economies. So with this common outlook between our two governments, spreading prosperity is something which India and the United Kingdom can and should work on together. And just looking at my own field of defence, there is considerable scope for doing so. You are the largest importer of defence equipment in the world. We are among the top investors in defence globally. You're interested in the issues of defence reform, transformation, of greater efficiency. That's a process we have just been through ourselves. It wasn't easy. We took painful decisions over our defence budget. But taking those decisions has enabled us to balance our books, but still to maintain the largest defence budget in Europe and the second largest in NATO behind the United States, and to set out a balanced £160 billion equipment plan over the next 10 years. That is now seeing the latest generation hardware coming through in all three domains. To give one recent example, we recently floated up the Navy's flagship Queen Elizabeth carrier. That will be the largest, most powerful ship ever built in the United Kingdom, and we've announced we'll soon be joined by a second operational carrier now being assembled in Scotland. So we are trying to catch up with your own Indian Navy. We in the United Kingdom would be only too happy to share our defence reform experiences, the good and the bad, with you both at the civil service and the military levels. And finally, just as you are looking for investors into Indian markets and for places to invest, we continue to see ourselves as your natural economic bedfellows. UK-India trade grew last year from 11 billion back in 2009 to over 16 billion. We are the largest investor of the G20 in India. Since 2000, British companies have invested some $20 billion in India, and last year more than Japan and the United States put together. And Indian companies, in turn, invest more in the United Kingdom than they do in the rest of the European Union combined. So where do these shared values leave India and the United Kingdom as your new government sets out its ambitions and plans for the coming 5 years? As I hope we always made clear, the United Kingdom believes that India is a force for good in the world. Just by being itself, by being the world's biggest democracy, India promotes the values that help make the world a better place. India's very stability improves the prospects for greater stability in this potentially turbulent region. India's growing prosperity is spreading outwards, helping to enrich its neighbours as well as its own people. India's good relations with almost all the countries of the world helps promote understanding between countries who are sometimes on opposing sides in international affairs. And India's huge contribution to United Nations peacekeeping, over 8,000 troops in all, is playing a vital role around the world in preventing conflict, in building lasting peace, and in tackling humanitarian crises. That's why the United Kingdom supports India's bid to become a permanent member of the Security Council. And that's why we endorse a greater role for India in world affairs more broadly. Not just because we're a friend of India, although we're proud to be a friend of India, but because we believe that the more India is active in the world stage, the better it will be for the whole world. What is in this relationship for India? Why should India partner the United Kingdom in particular? As your new government considers how best to tackle the many challenges that it faces, I hope they will always keep one thing very much in mind. As has been the case since my grandfather's time here, our country's shared values make India and the United Kingdom natural partners. That's why we want to do all we can to help Prime Minister Modi and his ministers achieve their objectives. I know that on economic matters, your Prime Minister believes that the initials FDI should stand not only for foreign direct investment, but also for first develop India. And I believe that principle can also be applied to issues in the defence sector. And I think here we are ideally placed to contribute significantly. For example, we continue to use our influence as permanent member of the Security Council and as a leading partner in NATO to good effect. At the recent NATO summit held in Wales, we helped to ensure the agreement of all NATO members to deploy the sort of agile and effective rapid reaction forces we saw in Afghanistan. And we've also demonstrated our willingness to engage further across this region through the opening of new defence sections in our embassies in Thailand, in Burma and in Vietnam. And like India, we are increasingly working too with other security partners across the world, such as Japan and Australia. We have one of the largest diplomatic footprints in the world. And where is the biggest of those footprints? I'm delighted to say the very biggest is here in India. And our global influence is underpinned by our military power. We are one of the few countries that can deploy a self-sustaining, properly equipped, brigade-sized force anywhere around the globe and sustain and equip it indefinitely. And our defence reforms will make sure that our armed forces will be even more mobile and even better equipped. And we are one of the few countries that prefers to practice what we preach, ready to rapidly deploy military assets as part of a cross-government response into the region when called upon to assist. Whether by sending a ship, helicopters and 750 troops to Sierra Leone to help combat Ebola within 10 days of being asked to do so. Whether by assisting humanitarian and disaster relief operations in the wake of Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines, or by sending our submarines to the southeast Australian coast to help in the search for the missing Malaysian airline. But my main point is that whatever Britain offers India, we are better for having India beside us. So let me draw these thoughts to a conclusion before taking your questions. We want to see this friendship grow. We want to see it go from strength to strength. A century ago, our two countries stood together to help make the world a better place. That partnership is just as strong today. And there has never been a better time for us to work together. We are both countries that have recently discovered a spring in our steps. We are both countries on the up. We are both countries increasingly confident of our standing on the international stage. We are both countries able to exert real influence, whether by supporting Afghanistan through the work we put into development there, whether by pooling our intelligence and our military insight to crack down hard on the terrorists, whether to continue to support capacity building and providing vital humanitarian assistance to countries around the world. Ours is a partnership that is worth its weight in gold. And if we keep working together to further those twin aims of peace and prosperity, we will send out the strongest possible message to all those whose interest today lies only in the destruction of the things that we hold dear, that our two countries are ready to fight for our values and the security of our countries and the safety of our peoples, just as we did in 1940. I started, and I hope you'll excuse me, by mentioning my grandfather. We salute his generation today, but the future we are shaping is for our children. That future, for India and for Britain, is bright. Let's be determined to deliver it together. Thank you.